My name is Tamara Dunning. I'm a registered parliamentarian. My business partner, Lorenzo Cuesta, a professional registered parliamentarian. We are going to talk to you today about agenda and minutes. As we are going, it's very important if you have a question, please interrupt me or Lorenzo while we're going. Please do not hold your comments until the end. We want to get to the questions as soon as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing my screen. Okay, if you cannot see the PowerPoint presentation that says how to write an agenda and take minutes, please let us know right now.
I can see it, Tammy.
Fantastic. All right, here we go. When we write an agenda, the absolute most important question that we have to ask ourselves is who is the agenda for? Now, most of us think the agenda is this wonderful thing that lets us follow along in the meetings so we all know what's going to happen. And while that is mostly true, it does help. The agenda is actually for the public. The Brown Act requires us to post an agenda for the public so that the public knows what we are going to discuss, what we are going to take action on. And the Brown Act even requires us to have a very brief description, very brief, about 20 words. And that is so the public knows what we're going to talk about. You all already know the things that you talk about in meetings. The Brown Act has no requirement that says you have to have an agenda when you're in your meeting for you to follow along. No, the Brown Act only requires that you post an agenda for the public. Okay, so let's start creating our agenda. When we make an agenda, we need to know the who, what, when, and where. Okay. And the who is who you are. This is the very top of your agenda. Okay. The title, you can think of it as. So you're going to have the who, that's whatever your group name is. What type of meeting is this? Is this a regular meeting or a special meeting? I'm going to work very hard to avoid the word emergency meeting. And the reason for that is under the Brown Act, it's very hard. It is very hard for you to qualify to have an emergency meeting. An emergency meeting under the Brown Act is not, we have to get to an item right away. Lorenzo, would you like to give us a good emergency meeting example?
Imagine that you hear a black helicopter flying over your campus. 4 ropes are released. Soldiers drop down, dressed completely in black, with all helmets, rifles, grenades, and a whole bunch of stuff, jumping down because you have people who are causing extremists who are causing terrorist activity. That's an emergency. A flood, an earthquake, an avalanche. So that's an emergency. If life is not at stake, you cannot use the word emergency.
And Lorenzo is exactly right. Now, we have seen this used one time back in a few years ago when there were so many fires in California. One campus had fires actually coming onto campus and they held an emergency meeting. That is the only time we have seen it used correctly. If you have an item that you need to get to before your next meeting, that is not an emergency, that is a special meeting. So, moving on to the next section of your agenda, which is the body of the agenda, you have your call to order. Okay. When we have a call to order, we need to know who called the meeting to order and at what time. The next item on the agenda is going to be the roll call. In the minutes, we are going to put every single person that attended your meeting. let's clarify that a little bit. Every single board member, and by board member, I mean everybody that has voting rights.
Wait a minute, Tammy. What about the advisors? What about the
Oh,
parliamentarian? All these people that are there. What do you do about them?
that's a great question. So we all know that we must have an advisor at our meetings in order for the meeting to be valid. Underneath the roll call in our minutes, we would say also present were advisors, so and so and so and so. If you have a parliamentarian and parliamentarian, whatever their name is. What we do not do is identify any other members of the public because the Brown Act specifically prohibits identifying members of the public. So you have your roll call, which is only your voting members. Underneath, you'll write also attended by, and those are your advisors or your parliamentarian. Okay. The next item on your agenda is the adoption of the agenda. We always want to make sure we are adopting an agenda. If we do not adopt the agenda, anybody can hijack your meeting. On your agenda, you have your times, which limit the amount of times that we can spend on every item. You're seeing that as you go through the general sessions, right? These are how much time are we going to spend on this one item? If you do not adopt your agenda, then we do not know.
Tammy,
Orlando, you have a question?
yeah,
Go
Tammy,
ahead.
Orlando has a question.
Great. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Orlando. And
Yeah. Um, yeah. Hi, I'm Orlando. So you use the word hijacked your meeting. Hijacked your meeting. Okay. So I don't know what that is.
Okay.
okay, great question. When someone hijacks your meeting, it means that they are taking all of the time and all of the focus for themselves. So when I talk about a time limit, if you are going to have an agenda item that says we will discuss and take action on a picnic, but there is no time limit,
Okay.
one person can continue to talk.
Got it.
Imagine a filibuster. You're allowing someone to filibuster your meeting.
Okay. So that's in essence what they're doing. They're filibustering them. Okay. I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I keep going?
Tammy, what does it look like in the minutes when you claim that the agenda has been adopted? What does it read like?
Okay, so that's a great question. In the minutes when you adopt the agenda, before you get to that point, let's go back to we've reached that item in our agenda. It says adoption of the agenda. This does not need to be a vote. Okay, the chair is going to say if there are no changes, the agenda is adopted. Now, if we have changes, then we need to vote on them. And remember with the Brown Act, that has to be a roll call vote. Now, the same thing applies to the adoption of the minutes. Remember, right now we're talking about the agenda.
Yeah, before you go any further, Polly has a question.
Great, Polly, go ahead. You might have
Is
to
she
unmute
still?
yourself.
Oh yeah, hi. So I was wondering like if we do like list a time limit on the agenda, but there's no like agenda item that specifically says adoption of agenda, would that still be valid?
No. So her question was if we put the time limits on the agenda, pardon me, but we do not adopt the agenda, is that still valid? Well, no, because you have no way to enforce them.
Exactly.
The body, when the body adopts the agenda, the body is agreeing to those time limits. The body is agreeing to follow the agenda in the order that items are listed on the agenda. So if we do not adopt the agenda, somebody can start halfway down the agenda. Let's say they have a favorite item they want to get to and they want to talk about it. There's nothing that will stop them from doing that if we have not adopted the agenda.
Orlando has another question, please, Tammy.
Great. Orlando, go ahead.
Okay, so I haven't had to deal with this, and it's a good thing because I don't know what to do if someone says, I do not adopt the agenda, and then what happens? What do I do? What's my next step?
Okay, that's a great question. What do we do if someone votes no or says they don't want to adopt the agenda? Well, we adopt the agenda by a majority vote. So if you have one person that objects, so here's the chair. We've gotten to this point on our agenda, and the chair says, if there are no corrections, we will adopt the agenda. Someone says, I object. Then the chair has to go to a vote. Now, there should be never any instance where you do not have a majority vote on adopting the agenda. So I'm glad it has not come up for you before. It should not come up for you before. I don't think I have ever seen a body not adopt the agenda with the majority vote. Lorenzo, have you?
No, and it would be mindless. Why are you having a meeting if you don't have a plan? You're just planning to fail. You should not have a meeting.
Exactly. Now, some people may want changes to the agenda, and that's fine. They might want to move something up, might want to move something down. They might want to completely strike out an item before we even get to it. That's fine. We can do that. But we will always adopt an agenda.
Okay,
Tammy,
thank you.
Alice had a comment, or
Yes.
maybe she was just agreeing. I'm not sure.
Sorry, yeah, it's just agree, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the adoption of the minutes. When we have minutes to adopt, we need to include on the agenda what date are those minutes for? What meeting date? Okay. And again, this does not require a vote. The chair is going to say, if there are no corrections, the minutes are adopted. Okay. Now,
So
some
what,
people,
Tammy,
yes.
what if you have 3 sets of minutes for 3 different meetings that you have not adopted? What do you do then? What sequence?
So the sequence is whatever sequence are listed on the agenda, and we adopt them one by one.
But the oldest one should come first.
The oldest one should come first. If it is not, then it's going to go with the what's on the agenda. So you look at your in advance. You should have been sent the minutes. If you have corrections such as someone spelt your name wrong, and we all know how annoying that can be. Okay, I get that a lot. My name is Tami. Everyone always puts in the minutes Tammy. That's fine. I'm going to email the secretary so that change can be made before the meeting. Okay? So grammar mistakes, punctuation mistakes, all of those, deal with that before your meeting. If you notice it, email the secretary.
Tammy, Orlando has a comment.
Great, go ahead, Orlando.
So this area here has been problematic for me because when you say adoption of the minutes, okay, so that means that I have to bring a copy of the meeting that I had before and present it to the public so that they can approve that that indeed was what we discussed and happened. And then I have another agenda of the current and present meeting that's about to take place that has not yet occurred. Is that correct?
Well, that's mostly correct.
Okay.
And one of the words you said was you have to bring minutes and present them to the public. Here's an interesting thought. Lorenzo, where in the Brown Act does it say that we have to post minutes?
Only if it's an emergency, your life is threatened. Otherwise, Brown Act does not require posting of or sharing of any minutes. That comes down to your bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order.
Right. Now, the Brown Act does say that if the public would like a copy of the minutes, you have to provide them. But there's no requirement that you post your minutes. If you do, that's great. So when you come to a meeting, the people that should have seen these minutes, you would have already emailed them out to the board. because the board members are the ones that are going to vote on them. Okay. Orlando, did that answer your question?
Okay, so I've had to show the folks my old minutes and then my new minutes. So I've been doing it wrong. Is that right? Or
What do you mean by old
well,
minutes?
because what I've been doing is I've been bringing a copy of the prior meeting
Right.
to approve the minutes. And then once they approve the minutes of the old meeting, then I will share the screen with the new agenda that's up and coming.
That's correct. That is correct.
I'm doing it right then. That's
You
what
are
I'm supposed
doing
to
it
do.
right. Now,
Okay.
when you're showing the minutes in your meeting, the old minute from the old meeting, this should not be the first time that everyone has seen them.
No, this is the agenda that we used in the last meeting, right?
Right.
Tammy,
We-
we're getting confused in the fact that we're only talking about minutes. Agendas are only shown for the current meeting.
Yes,
Minutes are shown for all the past meetings.
right. So when you come to your meeting, when we get to adoption of the minutes, you're showing the minutes of the last meeting, which are a part of your agenda for this meeting, just the approval.
Oh, just the minutes then. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, the last agenda is never shown again. That's
Never-
irrelevant. Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
okay. So I'm only showing minutes, the numbers of the minutes that took place in the past.
that's
That
correct.
have not been adopted. That have not been adopted.
Has not been adopted. Okay, thank you. Continue, please. Thank you.
So,
Sorry.
Tammy,
no
what happens if
problem.
there are some errors and you need to correct them two meetings later or 2 months later? What do you do then?
Minutes can always be amended. So this is a great question, because what if your minutes are not finished from the last meeting? You have some of the stuff, you approve some spending, you need to adopt what you have. Okay? We can go back at a later meeting and amend the minutes to include everything else. But we always adopt what we have. Okay, continuing on the body of the agenda, we get to public comment. And we all know that we have to allow the public to speak, but we need to include time limits. And by a time limit, I do not mean we offer 5 minutes for public comment. Public comment is the only part of your agenda that we cannot put a time limit on the specific item, but we can limit how long someone is allowed to talk and how much time we will spend on each agenda item. For instance, public
You mean on
comment.
each topic because they're not on
On
the
each
agenda.
topic.
On each topic.
Correct. So for example, we're in public comment. Members of the public will have 3 minutes per speaker and 10 minutes per topic. So if you have 100 people in the room that all want to speak on one topic, okay, well, they're going to have to get together and figure out who's going to go first, because they only get 10 minutes for that entire topic. And they get a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. Now, if you get 100 people that want to speak on 100 different topics, we have to allow it. They all get up to 3 minutes, but we are going to talk about all 100 topics. All right. On your agenda, you're also going to list your guest. Is that
Tammy,
present?
before you leave the public comment,
Yes.
I've heard the phrase subject matter jurisdiction. What does that have to do with public comment versus motions that are going on later?
Okay, subject matter jurisdiction. The public gets to speak to you on anything under your subject matter jurisdiction. And
What is
what
that?
means is anything that affects students. Anything on your campus affects students. So if someone wants to come in and talk to you about the holes in the parking lot, that does affect students. Okay? There is a difference in public comment between talking about anything under your subject matter jurisdiction and an agenda item, we have to let the public speak, not just during public comment on any subject matter jurisdiction, but the public also gets a right to speak on any of our agenda items. If a member of the public starts during public comment to speak on an agenda item, the chair should ask them to wait until we get to that agenda item. Okay,
So what happens if public starts talking about something that's not in the public, it's not in the subject matter jurisdiction? What do you advise the chair to say or do?
the chair would say, I'm sorry, that is not under our subject matter jurisdiction. That is not something that we would have any control over. And hopefully the chair would be able to refer them to somebody who could help them. In our case, usually the advisor. You could ask the advisor to let the public know who to contact.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Guests, we're going to list if we have any presentations. Now, this is very important. If you are going to invite a guest in or somebody wants to come in and they want to give you a presentation, please remember to give them a time limit. Because if we do not, then sometimes the guests will know our meetings last till 1 o'clock, they last an hour, I have 1 hour to speak. When the reality is they only have 20 minutes to speak because you have a whole agenda that you have to get through.
20 minutes, that's an awful lot.
It is an awful lot, but it depends on the item. It is up to you, the board, and whoever's making your agenda to make sure you know how many minutes a guest needs or a presentation needs, and to make sure that you are telling that person how long they have to speak. Okay,
Tammy, go back, please.
go back.
Tammy, yes. On the public comment, I have often noticed that some senators will say, I have a comment that was emailed to me from the public, so I am going to talk about it now during public comment. What would you say to that?
Okay, we can read a public comment. That is allowed. But that is only if a senator can read a public comment if it comes from a member of the public. But in public comment, no board member may speak during public comment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And remember, a board member is someone with voting rights. All right. You should also have, when you give your report, that's when you're going to make your announcements. That's when the board members can speak. All right, let's keep going through our agenda as we build it. Unfinished business and new business. Unfinished business is not old business. It has not aged. Not getting a birthday party. There's no cake, although I strongly encourage cake at any meeting. Unfinished business is anything we did not get to on our last agenda. This includes even if we didn't start discussing an item. It goes on to the next agenda as unfinished business. If we have postponed an item to the next agenda, it goes into unfinished business. And remember, when we write unfinished business and new business, per the Brown Act, description of the topic only has to be about 20 words. Is this a discussion or an action? And what is the highest amount of money that we're going to spend? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about each of those. So hold on just a second if you have questions on that part.
I wanted to make sure. Can we go there? So you're saying that, let's say we meet weekly. Let's say we meet weekly.
Great.
And last week we had 2 items under new business last week. But we adjourned because we ran out of time. People talked too much. We never got to the new business from last meeting. Are you saying then that for this week's meeting, the 2 new businesses that we never reached are now under unfinished business? Is that what you said?
Yes,
Great. Thank you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Okay. So the body of the agenda, let's look at an example. The board will discuss the spring picnic. Now, you may know what that means. You may know what your budget is. You may know when the picnic's going to be. But remember, the agenda is not for you. The agenda is for the public. The public does not get a good definition with just you're going to talk about the spring picnic. Under the Brown Act, a Brown Act compliant agenda item would read, the board will discuss and take possible action on the spring picnic with a budget not to exceed $10,000. We'll talk about that more a little bit.
Wait a
Now
minute,
let's
go back. Tell me again, what were you trying to stress here? I want to make sure.
Brown Act
What is it?
compliant.
Yeah, what is
We
the
have,
Brown Act compliant part?
Can I answer that question? See if I learned it.
Yes,
sure.
So I think what Tammy was trying to stress in that last part was that this example, the board will discuss the spring picnic. This is not for the public. When the public, if the public was to see that, they would be lost.
yes, yes.
So the second part, which is what the Brown, this is Brown Act compliant agenda. Here, you have a little bit more detail to get the public on board with what the objective is. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct. Remember, the Brown Act also tells us that we may not discuss or take action on something that is not on the agenda. So if we start talking about this spring picnic and then we start talking about $10,000 and we want to vote on that, we are not able to, using just the example that says we will only discuss the spring picnic. We haven't
Tam-
told the public that we're going to spend money, and we haven't told the public that we're going to take action. Yes, Lorenzo.
Tammy, Polly has a comment, please.
Great,
Yeah,
Polly, go
hi.
ahead.
So for the Brown Act compliant agenda item, is this applicable to like, so for our agendas, we usually have like a section just called action items. So if there's an item listed under the action items, would we still have to like put a description?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that is a great example of writing an agenda for the board and not for the public. Because you all have made it short and sweet, right? Because you all know what that means. The public does not. And the Brown Act is very, very explicit. You must provide a description. That's not a choice. We don't get to say, well, we know what it means. We don't need a description. No, you have to provide a description.
So this would
Tammy, oh, go ahead, Polly. Go ahead. I'll wait,
Sorry.
please.
so this would be for all action and discussion items, right?
Yes, and yes, it should be for all action and discussion items. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what discussion items are in just a couple of minutes.
All
Okay,
right,
that's
thank
what I was
you.
going to say. Go ahead,
Yep.
Tammy, please.
Thank you. Any other question on using a Brown Act compliant agenda description? Okay, let's move on and start talking about minutes. A lot happens in a meeting, right? We have a lot of discussions. We have a lot of announcements. And we even have some motions. So what are we putting in these minutes? Okay. There's a huge difference between meeting minutes and meeting notes. Meeting notes tell us who said what they said, tell us about upcoming events. Meeting notes will give us some of the details of what someone had said in their report. Meeting notes include discussions. But what about meeting minutes? Meeting minutes record our actions. They record our decisions and critical report information. That is it. We often hear from colleges that say, well, the board says that they want more detail in the meeting minutes. That's great. What they want, what they're asking for are meeting notes. Meeting notes are not part of meeting minutes. Meeting minutes is your legal documentation of actions that you took. Okay? And we absolutely do not include any of the discussion, none of that. If you want that information, that is your responsibility to take as we go through a meeting. You take down the notes that are important to you.
Who is you? Who is you?
You, the board member. The secretary is going to take down the action, the decisions, and critical report information.
Let's
So
go back, Tammy. Let's go back, please.
let's go back.
Are you saying that if we have a meeting and we're dealing with a motion for 20 minutes, all we write down is a couple of items, a couple of lines that say it was moved and it was adopted by this vote? Is that
Hold
what you
that
say?
thought, but the answer is yes. When we get to the next screen, I'm going to show you.
Okay, Jesus has a comment, please.
Great, go ahead, Jesus.
Hi there. So in my agenda, there's a part where we include like announcements for the officers of our city council, and so in the minutes, I was told to put who said what and their name or whatnot. So, and based on this, does that apply that I'm doing it wrong, or how should I go about that?
Okay, so you're talking about just the announcements from board members?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about announcements from members of the public?
From the board.
From the board. So in your announcements, and this is a great question, do we write down announcements? No, we do not. Those are meeting notes. You would only write down that announcements were received. Unless they are a critical announcement. You're
Yes.
taking everybody's meeting notes for them. And you only take down the minutes. I've got an example of that for you. So one moment. Oh, we have a bunch more questions actually.
Yes,
popped up.
please.
Go
Take
ahead.
your time. We got plenty of time, Tammy.
Yes, we do. Okay, who has the next question, Lorenzo?
It only said 2 participants, so I'm trying to figure out who they were. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Let me tell you. And what I see is Contra Costa Castillo, no first name, followed by Orlando. I
Okay,
think that's it.
so the Contra Costa, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, hello. So my question would be, if you could actually elaborate a little bit, what is critical report information? Because we've also been doing meeting notes. So I would love to like go back and let my like ASU board on what is critical report information that only needs to be on the minutes.
Great. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few more slides, but for right now, critical report information is anything outside the standard report. So if the budget committee is giving the standard report, what they usually say, how much money we have, what bills we spent, we're not going to include all that in the meeting minutes. But if they say our account was hacked, that's critical. That's outside of the ordinary. And we're going to make sure that the public knows that. Now, the big difference here is reports should always be submitted in writing. And that report in its entirety would get attached to the end of the meeting minutes. Was there another question before I move on?
But first, before we go any further, the agenda should have a place for reports from committees, committee
Yes.
chairs, officers. So we really should have covered everything before announcements. So announcements is really just for, like you said, critical deadlines. But we have Orlando and Emma waiting to ask you something.
Great, Orlando, go ahead.
Hi, Tammy. So for me to understand and to differ, more importantly than to understand, to be able to differentiate between these three: action, decisions, and critical report information. But would you be so kind as to providing real life detail so that I can make note of that? Because with a detail, I can zero in on it.
Yes, and I have that for you in a couple of more slides, so if you'll.
Okay, then
hold
I
on.
can wait. Thank you. You know,
Perfect.
the next question.
Emma's next.
Great, go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, I just had a question. You said like during announcements from either the board or also in public, whenever the public's giving a comment, do we have to put like the name of who's putting it, or do we literally, you just said announcements were made? Is that all you would put?
Yes, and remember, we never, under Brown Act, we can never identify members of the public.
Right.
So that's very critical.
Yeah,
And
but
under
also,
announcements, we would, so in the minutes, when we get to public comment, it will say comments were received or no comments were received. None of the public information is going to be included there. Now, someone may need to get back to a member of the public, or the public may have asked a question. The chair is going to make a note and include it on the next agenda, so that could be talked about more. But we never include and never identify members of the public. So let's get to some of those.
just a minute, let's go back. On the announcement, we don't just write the word announcement were made, because you would hope that some of these people are giving you very important information like deadlines
Right.
or a change in policy, something critical. In that case, you would add it. But otherwise, you would hope that all these senators have an opportunity and they're really reporting from the committee work or as an officer, or if you're in CABE or ICC, all the clubs should have an opportunity to report, and they would be reporting at the top of the agenda, not your announcements. We don't want to minimize announcements. We just want to make sure they're placed in the correct spot. Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome. Okay. So we're in a meeting, and Mary moves, the Senate approves $10,000 for the upcoming end of the year picnic. Lorenzo's has seconded the motion. And now we go to discussion. Gary says a picnic is going to have enough food for 100 people. Sally says it's too expensive. Lorenzo wants cake to be included because he's a really big fan of cake. May says the decoration should be the school colors, and the motion passes unanimously. In the minutes, what are we including? What is going to go into our minutes? And the minutes will read, Mary moved to spend $10,000 on the end of the year picnic, seconded, passed unanimously.
You mean my name doesn't go in there that I seconded?
No, under the Brown Act, nobody cares who seconded a motion. We do.
Or Robert's rules. Or
the
Robert's rules.
I'm sorry?
Or Robert's rules either.
Or Robert's rules either. When you second a motion, this does not mean that you agree with the motion. A second only means that you want the board to hear this item. You could, let's go back to this $10,000 for the end of the year picnic. You could hate this motion. You could never, you don't even want to have an end of the year picnic. And so you're going to second the motion because you want to take part in the discussion. You want to be able to tell people why it's a bad idea. And you want to have a vote on this item so you can vote no. And during the discussion, you're going to do your best to sway everybody's vote to vote the way you want. Paula, you had a question.
Yeah. So you mentioned that a second doesn't necessarily mean that you're in favor of the motion, but if you're the or if you're the first person that motions, would you have to be in favor?
Okay, that's a great question. Do you have to be in favor of the motion to make the motion? Well, yes. Remember, under proper parliamentary procedure, the first person that makes the motion maker, gets to speak first. That's your first pro comment. Remember, we should be switching back and forth between pro and con. Now, here's an interesting question under parliamentary procedure, and we'll let Lorenzo answer this. If you make the motion can you vote against it?
Oh, definitely. However, if you make the motion, you may not speak against it,
That's
but you
right.
can vote against it. And then again, we don't care what the seconder is doing. He's got no business other than to say, in accordance to Robert, we need two people to want to listen to this topic before we can even consider it. That's all it means. Two people want to listen to it.
Exactly. But notice that we had a lot go on here during our meeting and our discussion that we did not include in the minutes. Because the minutes are only going to include the actions that we take, the decisions that we make. Okay? What
So
action?
are you saying, Tammy, that I pointed out cake should be included? We adopt the motion. Are they going to include cake or not?
No, because Lorenzo made a mistake. His mistake was not saying and making a motion to amend the main motion. He could have said, I move to amend by inserting and purchasing cake for the end of the year picnic. But because he did not include a motion, he only made a suggestion. We do not write it down. If you're in a meeting and you want to modify, to change, to perfect a motion, you need to form that as an amendment. And you need to say, I move, not I motion. Please, 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 please stop saying I motion. Motion is you start dancing in place, right? If you say I motion, I want to see you dance. I move means I move this forward so that we can discuss it and we can take a vote on it.
Tammy,
Yes,
if we
Lorenzo.
adopt to spend $10,000, but we only spend 9,000, does that mean we can take the $1,000 that we approved and distribute it among all the attendees?
No, you're just mad you didn't get cake. You're not getting paid for it. So what happens if we approve this $10,000? We only spend $9,000. That's fantastic because you came in under budget. And that's going to go back into whatever fund you took your $10,000 out of.
Thank
And,
you.
and Lorenzo's still not getting cake. All right, let's try another one. And this is,
Did we read the motion? I'm sorry.
you
Back
want
to
to
the
see it
previous slide.
again?
Yes, just to make sure.
This is the minutes. So
Yes.
remember, we'll go back. The motion was that the Senate approves $10,000 for the upcoming end of the year picnic. Lorenzo seconded. We had all this discussion and the motion passed unanimously. And in our minutes, they will read, Mary moved to spend $10,000 on the end of the year picnic, seconded, passed unanimously.
Or are we supposed to list everyone that voted for and against according to the Brown Act?
Well, yes, we do.
Tell me.
Brown Act says that we have to account for every single vote, whether you voted for something or against something, or whether you abstained. We will never see an abstention in any of your minutes. And let me tell you why. Because you do not, it is not your singular voice that you are voting. You are voting on behalf of a constituency that elected you to bring their voice forward. So if you do not want to vote on an item, that's great. You still have to tell us how your constituency votes. All right. Now let's say in the minutes, let's say we take this vote for the $10,000 for the picnic and Lorenzo voted no. Now we know, and he's only voting no because you guys just would not get him a cake. And he feels very strongly about that. At the beginning of our minutes, we have the roll call. We know who is there. So we can say passed unanimously without putting in a chart of everybody's vote because we have it at the top of our minutes. But on this one, Lorenzo voted no. He's pouting. So we would write all were in favor, all voted yes, except for Lorenzo, who voted in opposition, or Lorenzo, who voted no. Okay, let's look at our next scenario, which includes our reports. And we had a question about the reports. So we get to the report section, the activities chair said planning for the end of the year picnic was ongoing, but they need more people to help with the event. Budget committee reported on all the bills that have been paid. And the public relations committee chair says that the advertising for the picnic is going to be in the school newspaper and flyers will be made for social media. Remember, we're at the report section right now. So what goes in the minutes?
Tammy, there was a question on the previous one,
Okay,
and it's an important one. We don't want to
I,
leave that out because it's
go ahead.
and it is coming from Ben Collins. Maybe he needs to ask himself.
Ben, go ahead.
Hello. So what I was wondering was if when we record our votes for those in favor and against votes, can we report them as yays and nays?
No, we may not. And the reason for that is because the Brown Act specifically says we have to record every person's vote. So if we say, let's go back to this motion, Lorenzo has voted against this motion. If we say 9 in favor and 1 against, we have no idea who voted against the motion. And we have to have that information. We can say all voted in favor except Lorenzo, who voted no, because we have the roll call. So we'll know that of all the people on the roll call, only Lorenzo voted no.
Or voted nay. Same
Or
thing.
voted nay, correct.
Thank you.
But we may not, the only time we can say it was unanimous was if everybody voted for something, because again, we have the roll call. But we may not say 10 in favor, 2 against. Did that answer your question?
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's go back to the report section. And remember what we said.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So when you when you say, I know the parliamentary rules says something different on most of the shortcuts of parliamentary rules says that you need to have like a 2/3 vote to approve the rest or get the majority. So I kind of like don't understand that. Like, should I say majority of 2/3 or majority of overall people on the roll?
Okay, so that's a great question. How do we differentiate between a majority vote and a 2/3 vote? Well, we do not need to write in our minutes. We would not write, the motion passes with a majority vote. And the reason we would not write that is because we don't know who voted in the majority.
Right.
Does
But
it
does it say like which one should be 2/3 of votes and which one should be a majority of a vote or kind of thing?
Great. That is a great parliamentary question. When do we have a 2/3 vote and when do we have a majority vote? The basic rule of thumb there is, first off, check your bylaws, because sometimes your bylaws are going to be different than Robert's Rules of Order. Watch Lorenzo's face right now because he's just bursting to tell you this. But we need a 2/3 vote anytime we take away a right, a board member's right. Lorenzo,
Okay.
do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, in everything you said I agree. But Robert's rules is very specific. If you look at the chart of the motions at the back of the book, there are only a few that are really 2/3, such as stop debate or limit debate, or there are a few more. And like Tammy said, they take rights away from members. But the fundamental rule is it's always majority, unless Robert says it's 2/3. But as Tammy said, one of the biggest problems is going to be your bylaws, because if you're going to punish someone, if you're going to take somebody's position away, if you're going to appoint someone, your bylaws could say it takes 2/3. So there's never any doubt. It's always majority unless Robert or the bylaws say it's 2/3. But the question then comes, is it majority of those people who casted a vote? So if you have 20 people and only 10 cast a vote, Are we dealing with the majority of 20 or the majority of the ones that votes that were cast? Well, typically it's only those that were cast. That's usually the case. Your bylaws may say, no, it's a majority of all the members of the board. So you always have to go back and find out, what does the bylaws say? Typically, default is majority of votes that were cast. That's all. Majority of votes that were cast. And Colin still has another comment.
Yes, Colin, go ahead.
So it's true that Robert's Rules of Order are used in the US Congress?
May I reply?
Absolutely.
No, no. Let me tell you why. It's not an easy answer, but I want to tell you. Keep in mind, Robert's rules. Robert himself was an engineer. He studied what Thomas Jefferson and all those other guys when they were writing Constitution, what they all put together. But he realized that these people are putting things together to assure the survival of the political party. Robert didn't like that idea. Robert wanted to assure the rights of members. So Congress and everything related to government is related to the survival of the political party. That's why one person can keep you for 4 years, for 4 years, and you can pile up 200 resolutions and bills, and they never get passed as one person. You would never have that in Robert. Now, as if that weren't enough, Jefferson and all his buddies stole the ideas from the English Parliament system, and their right back there, their purpose was take rights away from the king and give it to those people who had property, and they had homes, jobs, and they had cattle, and they were of a particular color. So that was the rule back in Parliament in England. Jefferson changed that, and then Robert changed it completely. That's why Robert's rules is not used entirely. It is a basis, but it's always modified. Long answer, but an interesting point that helps you understand Robert's rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
I got
All right.
one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, but let's say, I know the Roberts rule yesterday said it's better to say I seconded, and that's like the right way and proper way to end the discussion. Should say it, but it says here on my shortcut or other rules says you can just say seconded, or I second, but not like what Robert was saying yesterday. But I guess the point here was to get my clarification out is that as long as I say second, that's okay. Just, or just saying that just wear a shirt instead of wearing a suit, kind of thing. So
I'm not sure what to. I think Tammy was just bumped because we lost her display. But no, the only thing you need to do is to to indicate that you are the second person who's interested. You don't have to use a complete English sentence. You can just yell second. What's more, I've got a couple of clients, and all they do is, and this surprised me, they give you a victory sign. Why are you giving me a victory sign? Well, what it really meant was second, too. I'm second. I second. It looked like a victory sign, but they were just doing this. And that was enough because that's all that Robert needs. That's all you should have to do. Thank you.
okay.
Tammy, are you on?
Let's-
Orlando had a question, Tammy.
Yes.
We're fine with time. We're fine with time.
Okay, Orlando, go ahead.
Okay, if we're fine with time, then I'm gonna go ahead and ask Lorenzo. I'm curious, what is it that you do? Because you just use the word clients, so I'm
Yes.
just curious. That's all.
Tammy and I have clients all over the state of California. We have had about 60 or 70 of the 115 colleges in the state of California that we've dealt with, helped them either by teaching or serving as parliamentarian during their meetings. But in addition to that, we also travel all over the country, and because we have national clients. Next month, I'm going to be in Florida, and hope I don't get sick with anything. But I've got a client out there with 30 board members, so we travel all over the place. This is what we do.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
it's fun. It's fun.
Thank you. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Tammy. Sorry.
That's okay. All right, so let's move on with the reports. And remember, we talked about the only thing from a report that we are going to include in minutes is something critical or critical change. And again, I remind you that if you're submitting a report, you submit your report in writing and they're all going to be attached to the end of the meeting minutes. So under the reports, activities chair, planning is ongoing. They need help with the events. Budget committee said all the bills have been paid. Public relations says advertising for the picnic, school newspaper and flyers are going to be made for social media. Well, what do we put in the minutes? The minutes will read, reports were received from the activities committee, budget committee, and the public relations committee. None of the information that was shared during reports is critical information. So we do not include it in the minutes. Those reports can and should be included, attached. I shouldn't say the word included, should be attached to the minutes. All right, let's move on.
Before you go any further, we need to remind people that if you were assigned as a committee to give a report, chances are you're giving a specific task. You're not just asked to talk. You usually ask you, make recommendations and such and such. So reports should not just be talk. We want them to give us information so they will help us make decision and take action. Thank you.
Correct. And not only that, but if you let's go back to one slide and talk about the planning for the end of the year picnic from the activities chair. Now, if the activities chair is bringing something back, they were assigned to do the planning. They come back and they make the report. They tell us this is what we suggest, not what we decided. Because remember, committees never make a final decision. Any decision or conclusion that a committee comes to must go on the agenda for a vote by the whole board. Okay? Committees do not make final decisions. So if the committee is asked to report and plan the picnic, they have a $10,000 budget. They come back, they are not going to give just their report. They're going to be requests to be put on the agenda as an agenda item so that the board may vote on all of their recommendations. All right. Let's talk about acronyms.
Don't change anything. But before you go any further, there was a comment made about Congress using the words "a" and "nay." The only reason they use that is because they believe that if you have a voice vote, yelling yes and yelling no don't sound the same, and it's hard to compare them. So they changed it so that you sound like a sailor and you go "aye" or "yay," and then you sound like a mule and you go "nay." Nay, they really think that by making two different sounds like this, you can truly find out whether the ones have it or the other ones have it, and you can't because people are going to yell or they're going to whisper. So a voice vote is illegal in the Brown Act. Illegal in the Brown Act. Congress does whatever they want to. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about acronyms because acronyms are wonderful, but they are not your friend. Okay. Here is an agenda item. The SS will discuss using SRF funds in the amount of $1,000 to attend the SSCCC GA. You and I and everyone on this call knows exactly what all of those acronyms means. My grandmother has no clue what any of those acronyms means. The public has no idea what those acronyms means. And remember, and I will say this over and over, the agenda is not for you. The agenda is for the public. The public needs to know what the heck does that mean? So Brown Act, that agenda item, rewritten to be Brown Act compliant. The Student Senate shall discuss and take possible action on spending up to $1,000 of the student representation fee to attend the Student Senate for California Community Colleges General Assembly.
Great.
Thank you. We have to make sure that we are following our state law with the Brown Act and giving accurate descriptions so the public can understand what the heck it is we're going to do. All right. This question came up earlier and I promised I'd get to it. Is an item discussion or action? And I give two examples here. The Student Senate shall discuss spending $10,000 for the end of the year picnic. That's an agenda item. Or we could say the student senate shall discuss and take possible action on spending $10,000 for the end of the year picnic.
What's wrong with the first one?
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot wrong with it. But the most basic thing that's wrong with that first item is that it does not have the words "and take possible action." We see on a lot of your agendas, you will write discussion items. And that's great. But we have also seen during a lot of your meetings that on these discussion items, what will happen is someone will have a great idea and someone will move to vote on that great idea. And the instant that happens, we just broke state law. Because we told the public we are only going to talk about it, we will make no decisions. And by making no decisions, I mean we may not form a committee, we may not refer something to a standing committee, we may not create an ad hoc committee, we may make no motion, we may make no decision, even if we say these are all great ideas and I think we all agree on them. No, we reached a decision. We told the public we were not going to do that. We should never, ever, let me be clear, never say we are only going to discuss an item. Every item on your agenda should be discuss and take possible action.
Tammy.
Yes,
Tammy,
sir.
Yeah.
Someone wants to argue with me on this?
Yeah, no,
I love
there's
it.
something we need to correct. And Colin points out that Brown Act is only California. Well, we know that all states have something, but they call it differently. But all states have it. But that's not what I'm concerned about. Southwestern College says it all depends, I believe, on ASO, SBA, SGA, and more. Whether the Brown Act applies or not.
No, it does not.
Tammy,
It
thank you. Why?
absolutely does not. The Brown Act is state law. It applies to every ASO, SGA, SBA, whatever you want to call yourself. You are 100% covered under the Brown Act.
It's like the education code. It applies
That's right.
to every single college.
And here's a question that we get sometimes. Well, we can suspend the Brown Act, or we can vote during the meeting to change something from a discussion item to an action item. Both of those comments are 100% wrong. And let me tell you why. One, you cannot suspend a state law. You have no authority to do that. Zero, zip, nada. You may not change something on your agenda from discussion item to action item because you had to post your agenda 72 hours in advance to tell the public what you were going to do. And you told the public you were only going to discuss something. You may not now change your mind and say, oh, whoops, we realized that maybe we do want to vote on that.
Tammy, Polly has a comment.
Great, Polly, go ahead.
Yeah. So our agendas usually like at the bottom we have like a disclaimer that says like the board like reserves the right to take action on items. Like would that be like sufficient, or do we have to include this?
No, that is not sufficient at all. Remember, the Brown Act, the state law says you have to give an approximate 20-word description on what you're going to do and what it relates to. So hiding it in a footnote does not meet the Brown Act requirement that says on every agenda item. You need to tell the public you're going to discuss and take possible action on. And I'm seeing the little screen popping up with lots of comments in the chat.
One thing is, someone, Jesus asked, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? But through Emma's
Absolutely.
help or somebody else's help, it'll be posted in the
Yeah, it'll be
in the app.
posted.
But there was another question, and I was trying to read it, and it's been Ben says, Ben, please ask your question.
If the agenda is posted more or less than 3 days before the next meeting, is the meeting not official?
So the question is the agenda posted less than the 72 hours? Is the meeting official? If the
Answer
agenda-
that.
Or more?
If you If you do not post the agenda 72 hours in advance for a regular meeting, you may not have a meeting because the state law says it must be 72 hours. And I am absolutely not talking about days. There's nothing in the Brown Act that says the word days, it's hours. Always count backwards for your hours. I want to put another disclaimer on this. If you forget to post your agenda, and it happens for a regular meeting, and you forget to post the agenda 72 hours in advance, you may not turn your regular meeting time into a special agenda. You may not have a special meeting during your regular meeting time. Special meetings are only for things that happen between two meetings that cannot wait until the next regular meeting. So
But remember, he also asked, what if you posted more than 72 hours? And of course, the answer is
great.
no problem.
That's wonderful. And not only if you but if you post an agenda more than 72 hours in advance, you may make changes to the agenda up until 72 hours in advance.
Tammy, we
Okay.
got eight more minutes.
8 more minutes. So let's keep talking about your minutes. In the first paragraph, we are going to state the kind of meeting, regular or special, your name, the date, time, place of the meeting, and who was present, was quorum established, and if the minutes from the previous meeting were adopted. That's all right there at the top. Now, we've seen all this before, right? This is what's these first three items. I moved forward too quickly. The first three items are your agenda. If you follow your agenda to take your minutes, you will not go wrong. You will not forget anything, because immediately after who was present, well, that's your roll call. Under roll call, you're putting who was present. Right under that, you're going to put the declaration from the chair, which will always be a fraction, whether or not you have quorum. And the chair, after roll call, will say, with 19 out of 20, quorum is established. Okay. We keep going down. We adopt the agenda. Keep going down on our agenda. We've adopted the minutes. And now we get to the body of the minutes. And we include all the main motions. As soon as someone says, I move, that's the secretary's clue. They need to be paying attention. Lorenzo moved to. Okay. And we put the exact wording of the motion. Lorenzo moved to have cake at the picnic. Someone seconds it. We're going to include all the amendments. Okay. Polly moved to amend by inserting chocolate before cake. That's an amendment. And we include the vote. Remember, every person's vote must be accounted for. Okay. We're also going to include secondary motions that were not lost or withdrawn, such as taking a recess, fixing the time which to adjourn, suspending rules, any notices of motions. And what that means is in our meeting, somebody tells us, at the next meeting, I'm going to move to do something. That's giving notice that they're going to make a motion at the next meeting. We're going to include that in our minutes. Anytime we have a point of order and an appeal, and when we have an appeal, we're going to include the reasons that the chair gave for their ruling. And at the very end, the last paragraph, we are going to include the time that we adjourned, and we include the signature of the person taking the minutes, who's usually the secretary. And by signature, I don't mean an actual John Hancock. I just mean if I took the minutes, I would say minutes submitted by Tammy Dunning. Okay. Any questions, any comments?
5 minutes, Tammy, 5 minutes.
Great, we have 5 minutes. Polly, go ahead.
Yeah, hi again. So I think you mentioned earlier that board members cannot address or cannot like talk during public comment? Like,
Correct.
is that part of the Brown Act, or like can it vary across like different like ASU boards?
It does not vary across any ASU board because the Brown Act says that time is reserved for members of the public. And remember, the public is anyone who does not have a vote on the board. So if board members want to make announcements, you would either need to do that during your report, or you can add at the bottom of your agenda before adjournment, you can add announcements. And those announcements can come from board members, but public comment is reserved only for members of the public. Any other questions?
Ben had raised his hand, but I think he lowered it.
Okay. Ben, thank you. Orlando, you have a question.
Yeah, please, just before I go to summarize, can you kindly give me a detailed action of an action and then a detailed example of a decision? Like, yeah, just I don't think I'm really
That's a great,
No,
that's a great
confident
question.
yet.
it's fine. It's
It's a
fine.
great question. An action is Lorenzo moved to have cake at the picnic. That's an action.
Okay,
He
got
is
it.
moving that forward. A
Okay,
decision is when the board votes on it. The
Okay.
motion passed unanimously.
okay, a vote. Okay, so Lorenzo moved. That's an action.
Yes.
The
Yes,
decision is when we actually
Take a
take a
vote.
democratic vote, right?
Uh-huh,
That's
exactly.
the
absolutely right.
What
decision.
we're trying to do is separate it from blah, 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 blah discussion. Anything is not discussion, it's good. Thank
And
you.
critical report, the key there is outside of the ordinary.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. You're very welcome.
2
And we
minutes.
have come to the end of our time. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our presentation. We hope you have a fantastic rest of General Assembly. Lorenzo, anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that this was not intended to be a Brown Act presentation, but
Kind
the
of
Brown
worried.
Act was not listed in your workshops, and it is
Right.
impossible to talk about the minutes and the agenda without explaining the sequence, the consequences, which is a Brown Act. So you needed to hear all of this, and maybe in two different presentations, but you needed to hear about Brown Act, and it's not in this sessions for the entire 3 days, and you cannot separate it from agenda and minutes. These two, agenda and minutes, or those lifesavers, they're going to be the ones that are going to allow you to justify, document, and prove that you did something or you have authority to do something. If you don't take minutes or if you don't have an agenda, you're looking for trouble, and you shouldn't be doing that because you're learning to be professional. When you leave here and you have a career, they will always use agenda and minutes. You need to get used to using them correctly because you will need them. Back to you, Tammy.
Thank you. I'm including our email in the chat for those of you who have any additional questions, because we did promise that we have to end on time. I'd also really like to thank Emma for being our host today in the room and for taking care of everything. Thank
And we'll
you so
post,
much,
yeah, and
everybody.
we'll post the PowerPoint in the app. And if you can't get it there, contact us. We'll send it to you by email.
Okay,
Yes,
You.
thank you
exactly.
both. Thank you. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you so
See you.
much. Bye-bye now.